Today, a woman can transmit her genes even if she cannot give birth. It's good for her. She's happy with that. But we have to think in terms of species. The same from conception. It's suddenly it's absolutely new that we have neutralized the laws of natural selection. Until recently, it was still the opposite. For example, if newborn baby was not strong, what they were doing, a cold bath to see if baby will survive. So it was actually amplifying the laws of natural selection. If the baby does not survive, we forget it.
Michel, welcome to my program here, the Holistic OBGYN podcast.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me to talk with you.
As a sort of preface to the conversation, I wanted to remind everybody what you said, which is that your ears are 92 years old, and English is not your first language, French is your first language. So I'm going to try to speak as articulately as possible because we're also 5 or 6 hours apart talking from across the world.
Many technical problems.
Yeah. Michel, you've been dare I say, a hero to me for many years. When I was early in my medical training, I found your work and realized that perhaps there was a different way to look at birth work. So I want to thank you first off for just the experience that you gave me, which was an alternative view of how to practice medicine in women's health. So I wanted to thank you for that first.
Thank you. So I'm curious. I'd like to know a little more about you, but
sure.
Start talking as you want. Introduce the topic as you want.
Yeah. So, I'm an OBGYN, and I did all of my training at a big medical system called Kaiser Permanente out on the West Coast of the United States. And I became very disillusioned with the amount of interventions and the way that it didn't really seem like informed consent was being acquired. There wasn't a real conversation around the risks, the benefits, the alternatives. It was just like, this is the way we do it. There's sharp things, there's hands in places where they don't belong. And very quickly I realized I didn't want to be in that system anymore. So I'm curious, when people bring up your work, the great Michel Odent, they always say, you kind of remind me of Dr. Odent. And of course, that's a real privilege for me to hear that. Like, what an honor to be compared to you. But I think what's really special about your story is that you are, much older than I am. And it wasn't as easy to do that, to step out of the system. So I'm wondering, when you started realizing that birth is maybe not a medical procedure, pregnancy is not a disease.
Yes, I think it's an important way, a useful way to start our conversation.
Let's start there.
By emphasizing that originally I am not an OBGYN. I'm not an obstetrician. Originally, I am a surgeon. I'm a surgeon educated in the 1950s. That is to say, the decade when the new technique of cesarean section, the low segmental, became frequently used. Before that time, in general, the midwife was asking the surgeon to do a cesarean section. And at that time, in general, it was a classical corporeal cesarean section. So while I was trained as a surgeon, in the Lancet, I've been presented as one of the last general surgeons. Because it happened that in one day I did operated the prostate, appendicitis, broken leg, gallbladder, and cesarean section. Once in the Lancet, they said I was one of the last general surgeons as we were educated in the 1950s. And as a part of our training work, what we had to do, in the 50s, in the context of emergency surgery, there were cesarean sections. The common scenario was a midwife asking the surgeon, please, can you do a cesarean section? So this is how I started.
Wow.
After spending 6 months in the maternity unit of a Paris hospital as a medical student, what called externe in French, 6 months. So I already had a certain background in obstetrics, although at that time my project was not to become an obstetrician. But so I have to explain that, plus important detail that in 1958, 1959, I was in the French army during my military duty in Algeria. And at that time, the local surgeon uh, trained me to practice the better way, the new segmental technique of cesarean section. So that's important in terms of history. It's an important point. Important point because in 1962, back to normal life after being in the army, I was I became in charge. I was in charge of the surgical unit of a state hospital an hour from Paris. That was 1962. So I was there in charge of the surgical unit.
Wow.
But in that hospital, there was a small maternity unit, two midwives, 200 births a year, managing when that problem, calling the local surgeon, was still doing corporeal cesarean section. And when they knew about my background, because officially no doctor was in charge of this small maternity unit. So I was involved by chance.
Yeah.
By chance, I was involved in childbirth. I found that interesting to talk with the midwife, to ask questions. Why do you do this? Why do you do that? In a rural area where women were not at that time I'm not thinking a lot of going to a hospital to give birth. Hospital was the place you go, well, much more for dying or something. Uh, so I became interested in the environment of the birth process. All these women from rural area were not comfortable in the hospital. So I have to be fast. Gradually, we reconsider everything. For example, creating a home birth, a home-like birthing home. You can
Mm.
forget you are in the hospital. Inviting women to come to the hospital for singing together. Introducing originally plastic paddling pool so that women could relax during the first stage of labor if it was not easy. I summarize, but it was not overnight, it was. So the result, when arrived, there were 200 births a year. In 1097, we had 1,000 births a year.
Wow.
Went from 200 to 1,000 births a year. So from that time, 1977, until my retirement from the hospital career, I was every year the only doctor in charge of 1,000 births a year with
Wow.
6 midwives. I had no time for surgery
Mm.
except a little bit of gynecologic surgery. I had young doctors assisting me for surgery. And so I was not an obstetrician originally, but during many years, I've been the only doctor in charge of 1,000 births a year in a hospital. After
How,
my hospital career, I also practiced home birth.
yeah.
And so that to say that one reason why probably I don't think the usual way is that, in fact, had an interdisciplinary perspective, of
Yeah.
course, the sense of what is important, what is less important. For example, one day, on the same day, I did a gastrectomy for an elderly woman in the 80s for cancer on the stomach. And on the same day, a woman came and gave birth to a bridge baby. Everything was okay. But I thought, in retrospect, what was really important? The life
Mm.
expectancy of octogenarian, of a woman in the 80s with a stomach cancer. And this baby, bridge birth, who have a life expectancy of 80 years or more. What? And gradually, I realized that what I was doing in a small maternity unit originally, finally, was perhaps what more important
Yeah.
that I was doing in a surgical unit. So it's an unexpected way, perhaps for you, to
Wow.
summarize my career. People all constantly think I am an OBGYN,
Yeah.
but no, no. That's
Yeah.
why I have a different way of thinking. It's a
Yeah.
question of way of thinking, of paradigm, way of thinking, and how gradually uh, I understood what is important regarding birth physiology among humans, reconsidering everything. And I think that uh, when you have to reconsider everything, when you think a different way compared with others, the important point is to start from a useful question.
Mm.
Important point is which question is your point of departure at the present time uh, when you consider what you learned in textbook, what you read about birth physiology. What was the point of departure? The question. The question was, why are human births difficult? Why they are difficult? And the answer, oh, mechanical reasons.
Too big of baby, too small a pelvis.
Yes, they show you. Yes, they show you pictures, and in fact, what you understand for mechanical reasons, human births are difficult. Full stop. You are not curious after that. You cannot change the shape of the body of a mother giving birth. So, so,
Right.
that, so but because probably of my own way to be involved in childbirth, I was starting from another question. Because most of the time, the midwife were not calling me, in the hospital. It was not common, not common. You could, and my question was much more, why occasionally are human birth easy and fast?
Mm.
For me, this is the important question. And perhaps it's one more common at that time, in the middle of the 20th century, that some women occasionally were nothing special in terms of morphology, could give birth so quickly. No time to go to the hospital. That that's very fast, easy and fast. Eh, That, for me, that would be the basis of the useful question.
Mm.
Why, among humans, childbirth is occasionally easy and fast?
Right.
That
Right.
instead of
Right.
always wondering why is it difficult, why is it?
Yeah.
There was an important anecdote in my way of thinking. I think it was 1964. Timing is important. At that time, I have a friend working in a pharmaceutical firm, and he told me we have a new molecule at our disposal, a new substance. It's called gamma butyric acid, GHB. It's roughly the same as gamma, aminobutyric acid, GABA. They say that is a neuromediator which is inhibiting, with inhibitory effect, neocortical activity. So perhaps it has a future in anesthesiology. So in France, it was called gamma wash. It's gamma immunobutyric acid. So it doesn't matter. So he gave me this drug, say, some people say that it works like oxytocin. Could you try? He sent me some bottle.
Wow.
So we use these bottles first time, say, and when you having a women had a drip of this gamma immunobutyric acid, they're completely crazy, screaming, shouting, walking naked in the corridor, impossible. It was unacceptable, the hospital setting. But baby was born quite right away. And that, for me, is a turning point in my way to understand the birth process. The effect of gamma immunobutyric acid, GHB, neuromediator, which I repeat, has an inhibitory effect of neocortical activity. What I understood, it was not working like oxytocin. It was eliminating, reducing neocortical control.
Uh-huh.
And this is how I understood what is essential among birth physiology. I understood the solution nature found to make human birth possible is to eliminate neocortical or to reduce neocortical activity.
In other words, get out of the way.
Yes. Understanding the concept of neocortical inhibition, the fact that that our neocortex, so developed among humans only, can inhibit some physical functions. After that, I had other anecdotes that I could interpret thanks to what I had learned previously. For example, a woman, by chance, beginning of labor, and she was given a glass of champagne. She was the neighbor was celebrating her birthday. She said to this woman in pre-labor, "Do you want to drink a glass of champagne?" The woman was happy. She drank a glass of champagne. She had not the time to reach the birthing room. Baby was born in the corridor.
Wow.
You know that champagne, bubbles. They drink alcohol,
Yeah. Of course.
So that was another interesting anecdote. This is the basis of my understanding of birth physiology among humans. And this should be the main topic today. The point is not, as we usually do, why so many interventions, why so many cesarean sections. It's not that. The important point is a cultural misunderstanding of birth physiology. The point is not the attitude of doctors, of other people, or of health professionals. Culturally, we have not understood the basic need of a laboring woman. We have to rediscover this basic need. And to understand the real issue, we have to go back to the beginning of the socialization of childbirth. I must recall that it started about 10,000 years ago. It's an aspect of the domination of nature. 10,000 years ago, our ancestors started to dominate nature, domesticating plants, agriculture, animals, and husbandry. But what we forget to say, that at the same time, they started to domesticate human beings, in particular, physiological functions related to reproduction. We know today, because some human groups maintain Paleolithic way of living until the 20th century, we can say for almost sure that before the Neolithic revolution, in Paleolithic time, women used to isolate themselves to give birth. That to say, recent, but this turning point is recent. 10,000 years ago is recent. So before that time, women were isolating themselves. An interesting point, those who have studied human groups that have maintained until the 20th century the Paleolithic way of life always mention that women used to isolate themselves to give birth. But interesting point, they never mention about the dangers of childbirth. They talk about young children who died, accident, diseases. They talk about that a lot. But nothing about death when giving birth, neonatal death and so on, nothing. It's an interesting point. Why? No. Why? Is it to say that there have been thousands of years of natural selection for hundreds of thousands of years if a woman could not give birth, she could not transmit her genes. That's just after puberty to realize. Also, they had their first baby just after puberty, probably. And they were not disturbed by the socialization of childbirth. So this was really the turning point. And this is exactly what we have to realize now. To realize this turning point that suddenly human birth was socialized. To understand what's happening now, we have to understand the previous turning point. Domination of nature, human birth were socialized. It means that often there was somebody there when the woman was giving birth. That's the root of midwifery. And from that time, neonatal beliefs and rituals interfering with birth physiology. An example for that perinatal period.
Yeah.
The belief that colostrum, early colostrum, is bad for the baby. That was almost universal recently. Baby was authorized to find the breast at the age of 2 or 3 days. It was still like that when I was in the maternity unit in Paris in 1953.
Gosh.
At that time, the basis of our cultural conditioning was that a woman has not the power to give birth by herself. She needs help, somebody helping, guiding, controlling. She needs somebody. Birth must be socialized. That's the turning point. Until now, look at books about childbirth today. Until now, if you want to understand our cultural conditioning, what are the keywords?
Yeah.
The keywords are not about mother and baby, the two obligatory actors. No.
Yeah.
The keywords are about other people.
Yeah.
The keywords are helping, guiding, controlling. This one is very typical because it's an American book.
Yeah.
Book by Bradley.
From Bradley, yeah. Dr. Bradley.
What does it mean? That Bradley, second half of the 20th century, Dr. Bradley, to give birth, you need a coach. He was a guru in natural childbirth. But that, to say that the misunderstanding of birth physiology was cultural and reaching, in particular, the gurus of natural childbirth. You need a coach. That means you are unable to give birth. Let's go a little further.
Yeah,
Because
you need a coach.
American.
Well, Michel, let me ask you a quick question, real quickly. Since you trained as a general surgeon, I'm sure people over time have asked you, like, for example, as a surgeon, you were able to save people's lives who in the past when nature just took its toll, would have died. How would you respond to that whenever somebody says, "But doctors do save lives. If they
Oh,
didn't
yes,
intervene."
obvious. Yes. That the point is not that. The
Yeah,
point, the point is to understand what is cultural conditioning.
right, right.
Uh, it's sure that when I was receiving a guy with a perforated ulcer, I could save his life. I know that anybody else, but it's not a reason
Yeah,
not to study the effect of neutralized laws of natural selection.
yeah,
That
yeah,
is really, because in one, your question is important. Because in this case, you think of individuals. This guy will die if I don't operate in perforated ulcer. That, but when we talk about natural selection, our question is how long can humanity survive after neutralizing the laws of natural selection?
yeah, right, right.
So in fact, you introduce important points. It's that we have reached a time when we have to train ourselves to think long term. Until now, when we're involved in childbirth, you are happy, mother is healthy after the birth, baby is alive, you are happy. We have to think, what about the future of our species
Yeah.
if from now on women don't need to release hormones of love to give birth? It's what's
Mhm.
happening today at a global level with substitutive pharmacology, a
Mm.
drip of synthetic oxytocin, epidural, and so on, or cesarean section at a global level, at the level of the species. We can say today, women, we can say today, hormones of love are
Mm.
useless, redundant in the critical period surrounding birth. So
Yeah, I
what you
love
said
that.
is appropriate to say, of course, until now we've been thinking short term. But the point is not that now, when we are the prisoners of short-term thinking, the point is that we are the prisoners of short-term thinking. We don't want to train ourselves to think long-term. That's why we are apprentice sorcerers, or sorcerers apprentice, I
Yeah,
call it,
yeah,
because we are not training ourselves to think long-term. We think now obligatory about the evolution of the climate as an effect of human activities, pollution of the ocean. Right?
yeah.
But we never think at the present time of the evolution of Homo, our species, in relation to modern lifestyle, and particular in relation to what happens during the critical period surrounding birth. So that we are at the core of the problem.
Yeah, yeah. I
We
love
are
that.
condemned from now on to train ourselves to think long term, changing, changing our way of thinking, entering a new paradigm, a new paradigm. So
Mm.
that's the point. So that's why what I wanted to say,
Yeah,
that today we must not wonder why human births are difficult. We must wonder why is it occasionally easy.
yeah,
And if we start from that, we understand the solution that nature found to make human birth occasionally easy and fast. Simple solution, neocortex will stop working. And I am sure that among people who will follow our conversation, some of them, even now, 21st century, uh, uh, some of them will understand this solution found by nature. Some of them still know that when a woman is giving birth easily by herself, no need for doctors, nothing. But there is a time when she's as if cutting herself off from her world, forgetting what she learned, what she read,
mm,
forgetting her plans, forgetting. She can behave in a strange way, shouting, screaming, uh, swearing,
hmm,
details people don't notice. women in hard labor can perceive odors that other people cannot perceive. And that's an important point because the sense of smell, it has been well demonstrated, is one of the human physiological functions which is inhibited by neocortical activity. If you drink a glass of wine, alcohol, after that, your sense of smell is more powerful. That's a wonderful way to understand the concept of neocortical inhibition, the sense of smell. And women in hard labor themselves, people don't notice that because they think of mechanics, but suddenly can perceive odors, have stories, anecdotes. Women were adamant that somebody has been smoking there. So it's a very important point. And also, you understand the solution found by nature when you notice that women in hard labor, easy labor, fast labor, you can find bizarre postures, quadrupedal, like mammalian, primitive postures. And the day after the birth, often they forgot how they gave birth. They didn't remember many details. So when you bring all these things together, you don't need to talk too long to understand, and that's what we have to rediscover today. That's the point. We must stop trying to help women to give birth or to guide them, to control them, or to coach them. We must protect them. The key word suddenly is protection against inhibitory factors. And among humans, the main inhibitory factors are in the framework of neurophysiology. It's the important point among humans is to reduce neocortical activity. That's what the revolution we are expecting. The rest is blah, blah, blah. The point is not to be critical about group of people, doctors. They just share. Doctors, they share the cultural misunderstanding of their physiology. Everybody, it's cultural. It's cultural. So, and if this point is understood, after that, right, it's easy. Don't stimulate the neocortex of a woman in labor. It's simple.
Yeah.
It means, but don't talk to her. No, that the worst thing to do is to talk to a woman in labor. Neocortical stimulation. Careful with light in the age of artificial light. That's serious. Don't avoid such situation that a woman will have to pay attention to something. If you observe her, she will observe herself. That neocortical stimulation. If she perceives something strange, worrying. So that detail is important. The important point today is that we must realize that the concept of neocortical inhibition is a key to understanding human nature in general and some physiological function. And among these physiological functions, there is the parturition.
Yeah.
So here we are at this turning point. This is my main message at the end of my life. I have to go into
That's your legacy.
via war surgery and so on.
Yeah.
But probably, so it's a new way of thinking. Today, whatever the topic, we must change our way of thinking. And we must give a great importance to the keyword protection. Stop helping, guiding, controlling, and so on.
Yeah.
Protect, passive protection. I'll give you an example. We know a lot about what I call human birth preparation. Like you said, physiological speaking, what happens during the days before the labor starts. For example, we know today from MRI, brain imaging, that some parts of the gray matter involved in socialization shrink, their volume is decreasing during the days following birth, as if the need to desocialize was already starting before the labor started.
Oh, that's
That's
interesting.
incredibly important. But it does not come from obstetrical milieus. It comes from pure scientists, from Netherlands and Spain. In the same way, the the level of melatonin, darkness hormone, an essential birth hormone working with oxytocin, the melatonin concentration in maternal body is increasing before the beginning, the days before the birth, during the phase of birth preparation. That's incredibly important. It means at the end of when a woman is at the end of her pregnancy, she needs to live in peace.
Mm.
It's preparing. But people don't hesitate to talk about risk, about last leave the woman first in peace, except if it's really something very important. So just to say, because of the over specialization, we don't study in depth in a useful way period of transitions. What happened between pregnancy and maturation.
Mm.
After that, the link between maturation and lactation. We are the prisoners of over-specialization.
I think so. And I know for anybody out there who doesn't know your work, you've written at least 20 books on a wide variety of topics, not just birth, but also sort of the human experience, the future of mankind, the health of the oceans, etc. And the message for me, the reason I even asked the question of you in the beginning was when I do a lot of interviews, people want to know, why don't more people think like you? Or why is there so many interventions in birth? Why are they teaching doctors to do this? And a big part
Yes,
of my message is it's because that's what our culture has decided, that we can control every aspect. But some of your language blends so nicely into that. And I'm also a hospice doctor. I don't know if you have a different word for it in French, but end of life, feel like an end of life doctor.
yeah.
And that was additional year of training for me. And this war against nature um, has started to equate to um, living being equitable with merely avoiding death. In other words, to live our life, everything is okay as long as you're not dying. So if we look at what happened, let's say with the pandemic, what happens at the end of life, what happens in birth, virtually every intervention that we do in medicine is to avoid the reality in um, the reality that we're eventually going to die. What does our time look from now until then? Doesn't matter. Just run as fast as you can from your own mortality.
Yes, that's why we avoid topics. For
Yeah,
example, the neutralization of the laws of natural selection.
right, right,
That's
right.
an essential topic. Today, a woman can transmit her genes even if she cannot give birth.
Yeah.
It's good for her. She's happy with that. But we have to think in terms of species. The same from conception. It's suddenly it's absolutely new that we have
Mm,
neutralized the laws of natural selection. Until recently, it was still the opposite. We're reinforcing the, the laws of natural selection. For example, if a newborn baby was not strong, not can, what they were doing, a cold bath to see if baby will survive to a cold bath. So it was actually amplifying the laws of natural selection. If
mm,
the baby does not survive, we forget it. Or saying that the colostrum is bad. It has been belief during 10,000 years. That's a way to reinforce
mm.
the laws of natural selection. Because some babies perhaps would have survived if they had early colostrum, which is precious but not vital.
Yeah, I want to actually push this even further because a lot of people also say, they say things like birth is safe. Compared to what? If you are anesthetized You're able to watch TV while you're giving birth and everything else. It gives this, that's like a typical presentation in the hospital where you can be saved from the process of childbirth, and we can use medicines. We can speed it up with medicines. We can use surgical instruments, etc. When a person says that childbirth is safe, I actually don't like that phrase.
But which criteria do you use? If it's just perinatal mortality rate, yes.
Yeah, exactly. Like compared to
But there
what?
are other criteria. And
Right,
and we are condemned because we are so powerful now. We are
right,
condemned to think long term.
right, right.
Whatever the topic, nuclear waste, we have to think what about in 100,000 years?
That's
What to
exactly
do?
right. Yeah,
So today, we are, the important point today, a reason it is that we have developed different techniques to be incredibly powerful, with
yeah.
very powerful, but we have not developed our
That's right.
capacity to think long term. That's
That's right.
why we are apprentice sorcerers,
Yeah,
being
yeah,
powerful but unable to think long term. That's the
yeah,
definition, by definition, of the apprentice sorcerers. I discuss this point at the present time in the new edition, French edition, of a book called English Planet Ocean.
yeah, yeah. It just came out. Is it this
Yeah,
year or
yeah,
last year?
yes, Planet Ocean. It's to say that we cannot study the evolution of Homo without studying at the same time the evolution of the planet,
Mm.
sea level, something like that.
Oh, let's. I have. You got me. My wheels are turning right now. This idea, this war against nature, is so. Let's look at end of life. It's so confronting that we in the United States. I'm not so sure about the death rituals or rites of France, but we will embalm the body, put the body into a lead-lined casket, put the lead-lined casket into a concrete tomb, and then bury it under the ground because the idea of becoming worm food, dying and becoming a part of the earth again, is so confronting to us. I think that when you hear people conjecture about the ability of going to Mars, we're going to take humans and go to Mars and live there. I'm confronted by that notion because we are inextricably linked with the ecosystems of the larger ecosystem of
Yeah.
planet Earth. And people don't realize we cannot live apart from it. We evolved with the Earth. Mother Earth is a part of us, we're a part of her. And all of everything you've said really plays into this idea. Again, we are separate from Mother Earth, similar to the man in the clouds, the Christian theologies, that we can govern over and overpower the earth versus actually um, going into the current and swimming with Mother Nature. It's this is it. This is the critical point.
It's a critical point. You are right. What I find interesting, to go back to what I said about this book, is that when you consider what has been written
Yeah,
by experts in human evolution, well-known people, books, and there are all books, big books about human evolution, without mentioning during the last millions of years the sea level have been fluctuating of something like 200 meters. It goes together. Never they mention that if at a certain phase, most human beings were living in coastal areas along the sea, we'll never find their fossils because now the sea level are high. So,
yeah,
and that's an effect of the over specialization. I go back to that in this book, but in the French edition, published in October, and we'll have 3 chapters more, and particularly about neutralization of the laws of natural selection, what we've been talking about.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
assume it, I hope it will be the second edition of the English
Yeah.
book. I'm working at that now because that is, and it's good that we finish our conversation about that because we started from precise topics, working, being
Yeah.
trained as a doctor.
Yeah.
Finally, we expand the topic, extend we cannot, and finally, and what about the future of Homo?
Yeah. Yeah.
People are interested in the effect of human activities, but what about the evolution of Homo, and in particular, in relation to the critical phase of life,
Yeah.
highly disturbed, which is the period surrounding birth. So we must constantly enlarge the topic.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think it's a good way to conclude our conversation.
I think so too, Michel. Thank you. We can always talk more another time. I want to
Oh,
be very
yes. Now
respectful of
we
your
know each
time.
other.
Yeah, yeah. We have friends in France. Rixa Fries is a friend of mine.
Can you read French?
I cannot, no,
No.
but I can learn it. If it means enough to you, I would learn. I'd do anything for you, Michel. I really find your work to be very inspiring. But
Because
fortunately, I haven't had to learn it because everything was translated into English. So,
because my uh, next edition of this book, enlarged edition, updated, will be in French first.
yeah, yeah. Thank you so much, Michel, and I'll be in touch with you.
If there
Thank you
is
again.
something you have not understood because of my French accent, and sometimes I speak too quickly, perhaps you can let me know and perhaps introduce a subtitle. I don't know.
Oh, it was perfect, and we can always use subtitles if we really
You,
need to.
yes,
But I
you
thought I
can.
thought it was perfect.
You
Yeah.
understood roughly
I
everything.
did. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. I mean, if I can understand gamma hydroxybutyrate, I think the rest of the interview is a lot easier. I mean, it must be
Yes,
digestible.
yes.
It was amazing.
Okay.
Thank you.